The studio air feels different when the lights go bright, not warmer, just sharper, like everything is being seen more clearly than it wants to be. The laughter comes easy in a place like this, but there is a thin quiet under it, the kind you only notice when your chest rises and the breath does not feel complete. Keanu sits with his hands resting loosely, and he feels a small shift inside him, like a memory moving in the dark, not painful, just present. He cannot name it yet, but he can feel it waiting. The audience claps and smiles, the band plays a cheerful rhythm, and still his mind keeps listening for something softer than sound. He looks across the set, the clean desk, the polished floor, the bright signs, the neat chairs where people lean forward like they are ready to be surprised. He notices tiny details that most people miss, the way a stagehand presses a finger to their earpiece and blinks fast, the way a camera operator adjusts focus with a steady patience. It calms him, this hidden work, this quiet teamwork under the spotlight. It reminds him that any good moment is built by people who do not ask to be praised. Jimmy Fallon is in a good mood tonight. His smile is wide. His voice has that quick bounce that makes a crowd feel safe to laugh. He welcomes Keanu like a friend and like a headline at the same time, and Keanu meets it with a gentle nod. The audience cheers because they already decided they like him, and that is sweet, but it is also strange. Keanu feels grateful, but he also feels the weight of being turned into a symbol. He knows how easy it is for people to forget that a symbol can still get tired. The first jokes are light, about time moving fast, about how everyone pretends they are fine when they are late and they say traffic was wild. The crowd laughs and claps, and Keanu smiles too, soft and polite, not fake, just careful. He laughs with them because he respects the moment. He respects the people who came here hoping for an easy night. And still there is a private tension in him, as if his body is remembering a different kind of room, one where laughter was used like a mask. Jimmy leans forward and tells a playful story about a time he tried to act cool in front of someone important and failed in a very public way. The audience roars, and Keanu smiles wider because he recognizes the truth inside the humor. Being human is often being a little awkward. It is a relief to admit it out loud. Keanu glances toward the front row, where a young woman laughs with her whole face, and beside her an older man laughs slower, like he is choosing it. Keanu wonders what they carried into this studio with them, what they left behind at home, what they did not tell anyone. The show moves smoothly, like it always does, a warm machine of timing and cues. There's a rhythm to it that Keanu respects because it takes skill to make a room full of strangers breathe together. Jimmy asks about projects, about travel, about small habits, the kind of questions that let a guest shine without feeling exposed. Keanu answers in simple, honest lines. He keeps his voice calm, like a steady hand on the wheel. He wants to offer the audience a good night, not a heavy one. But as the laughter rises again, a tiny sound slips through the cracks, a short vibration from somewhere near the desk. It is small, and most people do not notice, but Keanu does. It could be a phone on silent. It could be a piece of equipment. It could be nothing. But it lands in him like a tap on the shoulder from a memory he has tried to keep gentle. He blinks once slow, then looks down for a second, not because he is hiding, but because he is checking himself. He feels a mild tightness in his throat, the kind that comes before words you did not plan to say. Jimmy keeps the jokes coming, and the crowd keeps laughing. There is nothing wrong, nothing dramatic. And that is why the tension feels stranger, because it is not caused by a big event. It is caused by something quiet, something internal, something that does not have a clear reason. Keanu shifts his focus to his breathing, steady in, steady out. He tells himself that he is safe, that this is just a show, that he can choose what to share and what to keep. Then Jimmy does what good hosts do. He tries to pull a moment of sincerity from under the humor, just a small one. He looks at Keanu with a softer face and says something like how people always talk about Keanu being calm, kind, respectful, and he asks how Keanu stays grounded when life gets loud. The crowd makes a gentle sound of agreement, like they want the answer to be simple. Keanu smiles, but this time the smile does not fully reach his eyes. Not because he is sad, but because the question touches something real. For a second, Keanu sees another room in his mind, a plain room with fluorescent light, a tired chair, and a man who looked strong but felt empty. The man was him years ago, after a long stretch of loss and work and silence. He remembers the way people laughed around him, not cruelly, just casually, because they assumed he was fine. He remembers how easy it was to let them assume it. He remembers how lonely it felt to be praised for being calm, while he was quietly learning how to survive his own thoughts. He looks back at Jimmy, and he feels an unexpected urge to say something that might change the energy of the room. He does not want to ruin the fun. He does not want to turn the show into a confession. But he also does not want to lie with a smile. He wants to honor the question because Jimmy asked it with respect, and because someone in the audience might need a different kind of laugh tonight, a laugh that does not hide pain, a laugh that can live beside honesty. Keanu starts to answer in the safe way. He says he tries to focus on simple things. He says he listens more than he talks. He says he remembers that everyone is human. The audience nods and the band keeps a light touch. It is all still fine. But Keanu feels that small vibration again, and this time he realizes what it is. It is not a phone. It is the tremor of a choice. The choice to stay in the easy lane or to say one true thing that might help someone breathe better. He pauses just a little. The pause is not long, but in a room built on timing, it feels like a door opening. Jimmy notices because Jimmy is good at noticing. His smile softens and he does not rush. He gives Keanu space without making it obvious. The audience quiets a bit like they can sense a shift, even if they cannot explain it. The cameras keep rolling and the bright set suddenly feels more like a living room, not because the lights changed, but because the people did. Keanu feels his heart beat once, firm and slow. He thinks of a person he met in a small cafe, a worker who looked exhausted, a stranger who did not want attention, just dignity. He thinks of how kindness can be a small action, but also a small truth. He thinks of how many people are tired of pretending they are fine. He looks at Jimmy and then at the crowd, and he decides that if he says anything deeper, it must be careful and it must be hopeful. He begins again in a voice that stays gentle. He says that being grounded is not a talent. He says it is practice. He says some days you do not feel grounded at all, but you can still choose what kind of person you want to be in that moment. The laughter is gone now, not because anyone is angry, but because they are listening. The silence is not cold. It is respectful. It feels like a shared breath. Then comes the first twist, small but real. A cue card near the desk shifts and a corner bends up, revealing a handwritten note taped behind it. It is not meant to be seen, and for a split second, Keanu reads one line. It is a simple line, written in plain ink, and it looks like it was placed there for someone else, not for the audience. It says, "Do not forget the quiet people." Keanu does not know who wrote it. He does not know why it is there. But it hits him like a gentle command. It turns his answer into something more focused. He feels warmth in his chest, not the warm tone of the lights, but the warm tone of meaning. He looks at Jimmy, and he can tell Jimmy did not plan that note because Jimmy looks surprised too, just for a moment, then he hides it behind professionalism. Keanu continues, now with a new clarity. He says that kindness is not a performance. He says humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of others more often. He says respect is what you give people when you do not know their full story. The audience sits still, and you can feel them checking their own lives, their own small moments, their own hidden fatigue. Keanu stops there because he knows part of the power is leaving room for the listener to finish the thought. Jimmy nods, eyes bright, not with tears, but with something close to them. He thanks Keanu quietly, and the band plays a soft sound that does not push the mood, it supports it. The crowd begins to applaud, slow at first, then stronger but still gentle, like they are clapping for something fragile and true. As the applause continues, Keanu keeps thinking about that note. Do not forget the quiet people. He wonders who placed it there and why it appeared at the exact moment the room needed a shift. He feels a new kind of suspense, not fear, but curiosity, because it feels like the night is holding another layer. And deep inside, he senses that before this episode ends, he might be asked to say something that will change someone in the audience forever. The applause settles slowly, like dust falling after a door closes, and the studio returns to its familiar rhythm. The lights stay bright, the smiles return, and yet something has changed beneath the surface. Keanu feels it clearly now, a quiet connection stretching between him and the room, fragile but real. His chest feels lighter, but his thoughts feel heavier, as if opening one honest door has revealed a long hallway behind it. Jimmy thanks him again, this time with a small, respectful nod that is meant more for Keanu than for the cameras. He makes a gentle joke to bring the mood back, something about how the show accidentally turned thoughtful before midnight. The audience laughs, but the laughter is different now. It is softer, more careful, like people are aware of their own breath while laughing. Keanu smiles, appreciating the effort to protect the flow of the show. The conversation moves on, touching lighter topics again. Travel stories, small habits, harmless fun. Keanu answers smoothly, but part of his mind stays with the note behind the cue card. Do not forget the quiet people. It repeats itself like a calm echo. He wonders if it was meant for him, or for Jimmy, or for someone else entirely. He has learned over the years that meaning does not always need ownership. During a short break, when the cameras pull away and the band fills the space with sound, a stage assistant steps closer to the desk. She adjusts something quickly, professional, and focused. Keanu notices her hands shaking just a little, not enough to cause a mistake, but enough to be seen by someone who is watching closely. When she glances up and meets his eyes, she looks startled, then offers a polite smile before moving away. That small moment lingers with him. He wonders how many people around him are carrying invisible weight while keeping everything running smoothly. He remembers times when he did the same, showing up, doing the job, hiding the strain because it felt easier than explaining it. The thought fills him with quiet respect, and also with a sense of responsibility he did not expect to feel on a late-night show. The cameras roll again, and Jimmy leans back into his chair, relaxed but attentive. He asks a question that sounds casual, but Keanu senses the intention behind it. Jimmy asks about advice, not for actors or famous people, but for anyone watching who feels pressure to always be strong. The audience reacts with a small murmur, as if many of them suddenly feel seen. Keanu takes a moment before answering. He is careful now, not because he is afraid, but because he understands the weight words can carry. He knows that people will replay this clip, share it, attach their own meaning to it. He wants to be honest without being heavy. He wants to be kind without sounding rehearsed. He says that strength is often misunderstood. He says that people think strength means never bending, never pausing, never admitting you are tired. He gently explains that real strength can look very quiet, like choosing rest instead of applause or choosing listening instead of speaking. The room stays silent again, but this time the silence feels steadier, less surprising. As he speaks, Keanu notices movement in the corner of his vision. One of the crew members near the cameras wipes his face quickly, pretending to adjust equipment. Another looks down at the floor, jaw tight. These reactions are subtle, but they tell Keanu that the words are landing somewhere deep. He feels a mix of gratitude and concern because he does not want to open wounds without offering comfort. Jimmy responds with sincerity, sharing a brief personal reflection, not dramatic, just human. He talks about how being on every night can feel joyful and exhausting at the same time. The audience listens closely, and for a moment the usual distance between host, guest, and viewers feels thinner. It is as if the studio has become a shared space rather than a performance space. Then something unexpected happens. A producer signals from off-camera, slightly tense. Jimmy notices and pauses mid-sentence. The pause is short but noticeable. The band stops playing. The audience shifts in their seats. Jimmy smiles and says they will take a quick pause, nothing to worry about. But Keanu feels the atmosphere tighten again, not with fear but with anticipation. During the pause, the same stage assistant from earlier approaches Jimmy and whispers something. Jimmy listens carefully, his expression serious but controlled. He glances toward Keanu, then back to the assistant, then nods. The assistant hesitates for a fraction of a second, then steps away. Keanu senses that something unplanned is unfolding. The cameras come back on, but the energy is different now. Jimmy clears his throat and addresses the audience. He explains calmly that they received a message during the show. He does not share details, only that someone watching from home felt compelled to reach out because of what was said earlier. The audience grows quiet, curiosity mixing with concern. Keanu feels his heart beat faster, not with anxiety, but with awareness. He realizes that words spoken casually can ripple outward in ways you never see. He feels both humbled and alert. Jimmy continues, explaining that the message is private and they will respect that. But he adds that it reminded him why moments like this matter. Jimmy turns to Keanu and asks if he would like to respond or if he would prefer to move on. The choice is given openly, without pressure. Keanu appreciates that deeply. He considers the options quickly. Moving on would be safe. Responding could open another door. He chooses to respond, but carefully. He says that if someone felt less alone for even a moment, then the conversation has already done its job. He emphasizes that help does not always come from big speeches. Sometimes it comes from realizing that the person next to you might understand more than you think. The audience listens, many nodding slowly. The emotional beat settles into the room, gentle but firm. There is no dramatic reveal, no tears on camera, no forced applause. Instead, there is a shared stillness that feels respectful. Keanu senses that the suspense now is not about what will happen next on the show, but about how people will carry this moment back into their own lives. The show resumes its planned structure, but the tone has shifted permanently. Jokes land softer. Laughter feels warmer. Jimmy thanks Keanu again, this time with visible gratitude. Keanu responds with a simple gesture, a hand to his chest, a small bow of the head. Humility, not performance. As the episode moves toward its final segment, Keanu notices the cue card again. The handwritten note is gone. In its place is a clean blank surface, like nothing unusual ever happened. But Keanu knows better. He feels that the note did its work and disappeared quietly, just like many acts of kindness do. Near the end of the show, Jimmy asks one final question meant to be light, but it carries a deeper edge now. He asks Keanu what he hopes people remember about nights like this. Keanu looks out at the audience, then toward the camera, imagining the countless unseen viewers beyond it. He answers that he hopes people remember how it felt, not what was said word for word. He hopes they remember the feeling of being seen without being exposed. He hopes they remember that respect can exist even in places built for laughter. The audience applauds again, steady and sincere. As the show wraps, the band plays the closing music. Keanu stands, shakes hands, smiles. Everything looks normal on the surface. But inside, he feels a growing sense that this night is not finished yet. The message that came in, the note that appeared and vanished, the subtle reactions from the crew, they all point to something unfolding beyond the stage. As he walks off set, a quiet thought settles in his mind. Sometimes you do not come to speak. Sometimes you come to listen. And sometimes, without planning it, you become part of someone else's turning point. Keanu does not know what the next step is, but he senses that whatever comes next will ask for more honesty, more patience, and more kindness than he expected. The hallway outside the studio feels cooler than the stage, not colder, just calmer, like the noise stayed behind on purpose. Keanu walks slowly, listening to the sound of his own steps, noticing how his body is still holding the energy of the room. Applause always fades quickly, but meaning lingers. He feels it in his shoulders, relaxed yet alert, as if something important has begun but not explained itself yet. A staff member guides him toward the dressing room with a polite smile. Nothing feels rushed, yet there is a careful attention in the air. Keanu senses it, the way people sense a change in weather before rain. When the door closes behind him, the quiet becomes complete. The room is simple: a couch, a mirror, a table with water. He sits, exhales slowly, and lets the silence speak first. His phone rests on the table, screen dark. He does not reach for it right away. Instead, he looks at his reflection, not searching for answers, just grounding himself. He thinks again of the message Jimmy mentioned, the unseen person watching from home, the private words that stopped the show for a moment. Curiosity moves through him, gentle but persistent. A soft knock interrupts his thoughts. The door opens slightly and the producer steps in, careful and respectful. She thanks Keanu for the conversation on air, her voice steady but sincere. Then she hesitates, just enough to reveal that there is more. She explains that the message they received was not a comment or a reaction. It was a request. Keanu listens without interrupting. The producer says that the viewer asked if there was any way to pass along a message to Keanu directly, not for attention, not for publicity, but because the words spoken on the show brought something unfinished to the surface. She emphasizes that they would never normally consider this, but something about the message felt different. Keanu feels a slow tightening in his chest, not fear but recognition. He asks quietly what the message said. The producer looks down for a moment, then says it was written by someone who once worked behind the scenes in entertainment, someone who left quietly years ago. The message said that hearing Keanu speak about quiet strength reminded them of a moment long ago, a moment Keanu probably did not remember, but that changed their life. The room seems to narrow slightly, like focus tightening on a lens. Keanu stays still, listening. The producer continues, saying the person did not ask for a meeting or a reply. They only asked for one thing, that Keanu be told thank you, and that he understand that his presence once mattered more than he knew. The producer offers to forward the full message if Keanu wishes. She makes it clear that there is no obligation. Keanu nods and says yes calmly. The producer sends it to his phone and leaves him alone again. Keanu waits a few seconds before picking up the phone. When he unlocks it, the message fills the screen longer than he expected. The words are simple, careful, written without drama. The writer explains that years ago, during a difficult time on a set, Keanu noticed them sitting alone during a break. No cameras, no audience. Keanu sat nearby and said nothing for a while. Then he simply asked if they were okay. Not as a star, not as a hero, just as a person. The message explains that at that time, the writer was considering leaving everything behind, feeling invisible and worn down. That small moment of being seen without pressure gave them enough strength to stay, to choose life over disappearance. They never spoke again. Keanu probably forgot, but the writer did not. Keanu feels his throat tighten now, stronger than before. He reads the message twice, slowly. He does not remember the moment clearly, and that unsettles him. Not because he doubts it happened, but because it reminds him how many small acts disappear from memory while still shaping lives. He feels humbled, almost uneasy, realizing how little control we have over the impact we make. The message ends with a line that echoes the note from the cue card. "Thank you for not forgetting the quiet people." Keanu lowers the phone and sits back, breathing carefully. The coincidence feels too precise to ignore. The note, the message, the timing, it feels like a thread being pulled gently, leading somewhere deeper. Another knock comes, softer this time. Jimmy steps inside, no cameras, no performance. He looks tired but thoughtful. He asks if Keanu is okay. Keanu nods and shares the message briefly, not reading it word for word, just the essence. Jimmy listens closely, his usual energy replaced by stillness. Jimmy admits that the note behind the cue card was placed there earlier that day by a longtime crew member. The crew member had written it for themselves, a reminder to stay grounded during stressful nights. It was never meant to be seen. When Jimmy realized Keanu saw it, he felt something shift but did not understand why until now. The pieces settle slowly between them. None of it was planned. None of it was staged, and that is what gives it weight. Jimmy says the crew member who wrote the note is the same person who once left the industry quietly years ago and returned recently in a different role. The realization lands gently but firmly. Keanu feels a quiet shock, not loud, not dramatic, just deep. He understands now that the message, the note, and the show are connected by something human and fragile. Not fate in a grand sense, but people crossing paths again through kindness that refuse to disappear. Jimmy asks if Keanu would consider staying a little longer off camera to meet someone. He makes it clear that this would not be filmed or shared. It would be private. Keanu does not answer immediately. He feels the weight of the request, the responsibility of stepping into someone else's story again. After a moment, Keanu says yes. Not because he feels important, but because he feels it would be respectful to listen. They walk quietly through a side corridor away from the main set. The noise fades completely now. They stop near a small room where a single person waits, seated, hands folded. The person looks up slowly when the door opens. Their face shows surprise, then recognition, then something close to relief. They do not rush forward. They stand carefully, like they are unsure of the rules of this moment. Keanu feels a familiar stillness settle in him. He does not search his memory for details. He simply stays present. The person speaks first, voice steady but soft. They thank Keanu for agreeing to meet. They say they did not expect this, but they felt ready if it happened. Keanu listens, nodding. He does not interrupt. He understands now that this is not about what he did long ago. It is about what the other person carried forward. The twist becomes clear in the quiet exchange. The strength Keanu spoke about on stage was reflected back to him through someone else's survival. The kindness he barely remembers became a foundation for another life. The suspense now is not about revelation, but about response. How do you honor a moment you forgot but someone else never did? Keanu finally speaks simply. He says he is grateful they stayed. He says he is honored to know that a small act mattered. He does not claim credit. He does not frame himself as a savior. He treats the moment with humility because that is the only way it can stay true. The room feels lighter after that, not because everything is resolved, but because something heavy was acknowledged. As they part ways, Keanu senses that this meeting is not the end of the story. It is the center of it. The realization settles in him that what he says next, publicly or privately, could shape how this moment continues. As he leaves the room, Keanu understands that the next step will require more than quiet presence. It will require a choice to speak again, but this time with the full weight of what he has just learned. And he knows that choice is coming soon. The quiet room empties, and the door closes with a sound so soft it almost feels imagined. Keanu stands still for a moment after the person leaves, noticing how silence can feel full instead of empty. His chest carries a slow warmth now, mixed with responsibility. What he learned cannot be put back where it was. It has already changed the shape of the night. He walks back through the corridor with Jimmy, neither of them speaking much. Words feel unnecessary for now. They both understand that something rare happened, something not meant for an audience but still deeply connected to one. When they reach a small seating area, Jimmy finally breaks the silence. He says that moments like this remind him why he started doing the show in the first place. Not for laughs alone, but for connection. Keanu nods. He feels the truth of that statement settle inside him. He thinks about the audience members who laughed earlier, about the viewers at home who paused their own nights to listen. He wonders how many of them are quiet people, unseen but steady, carrying more than they show. The thought creates a gentle pressure in him, not anxiety but purpose. A producer approaches carefully and explains that the network plans to share a short clip from the show online, focusing on the lighter moments. She asks if Keanu is comfortable with that. Keanu listens and then asks a simple question. He asks if it would be possible to include the reflective part too, without editing it into something dramatic. Just let it be what it was. The producer hesitates, not out of resistance but consideration. She explains that quiet moments do not always perform well. Keanu understands this reality. He has lived in it for years. Still, he gently says that maybe not everything needs to perform. Maybe some things just need to exist. His tone is calm, not demanding. Respect offered, not requested. The producer nods slowly and says she will try. Keanu thanks her not as a courtesy but sincerely. He knows systems move slowly, and kindness within them often requires patience. Jimmy watches this exchange quietly, noticing how Keanu does not push, yet does not withdraw. It leaves an impression. Later, as Keanu prepares to leave the building, a small envelope is handed to him by a staff member. No name on it, no explanation. Keanu accepts it without opening it right away. He steps outside into the cool night air, where the city sounds feel distant and soft. The lights of passing cars reflect briefly on the pavement, then disappear. Inside the car, as it moves through the streets, Keanu opens the envelope. Inside is a simple card. The handwriting is familiar. It is the same careful style as the note behind the cue card. The message is short. It says, "Tonight reminded me why I came back. Thank you for seeing me again, even without remembering." Keanu reads it once, then again. He closes his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. He feels no pride, only humility. He understands now that kindness often works in quiet circles, returning when you least expect it, asking only that you receive it with grace. The next morning, Keanu wakes early. Sunlight filters through the window, gentle and pale. The events of the night feel close, not distant. His phone shows messages from friends, from people who watched the show. Some say they felt seen. Some say they paused their day differently. None of them mention quotes or jokes. They mention feeling. One message stands out. It is from someone he does not know personally. They say they watched the show with their father, who rarely talks about his feelings. After the episode, the father said quietly that he felt tired of pretending he was always strong. It was the first honest sentence he had spoken in years. Keanu sets the phone down carefully. The weight of that message settles deep. He realizes that the night did not end at the studio door. It carried forward, branching into homes, conversations, silences. The suspense he feels now is not about surprise, but about responsibility. What happens next depends on what he chooses to do with this awareness. Later that day, Jimmy calls him, not as a host, but as a friend. He tells Keanu that the network agreed to share the reflective clip without heavy edits. He admits they were unsure at first, but something about the response made them reconsider. The clip is already being watched, quietly shared without noise or outrage. Keanu thanks him. He feels a calm resolve forming. He knows that speaking again could deepen the impact, but he does not want to turn reflection into a campaign. He wants to protect the sincerity of the moment. Still, he senses that silence alone may not be enough. The twist of the story becomes clearer now. The kindness Keanu once gave unknowingly has returned, not as praise, but as a reminder of influence. Influence that does not belong to him alone, but passes through him. He understands that the next step is not about him speaking louder, but about him pointing attention away from himself. That evening, Keanu sits alone with a notebook. He writes slowly, not scripting, just thinking. He writes about quiet people, about unseen labor, about respect without recognition. He writes about how laughter and seriousness can share the same space without canceling each other out. As he writes, he realizes that he may be asked to return to the show or to speak publicly again. And if that happens, he knows exactly what he will do. He will shift the focus. He will use the platform not to explain himself, but to honor others. The suspense now rests in anticipation, not of drama, but of choice. Keanu senses that the final shape of this story will be decided by how gently he handles the attention that follows. And he knows that kindness, once awakened, often asks for one more step forward. The day of the follow-up arrives without ceremony, quiet and unannounced like most meaningful things do. Keanu sits by a window in the early morning light, watching dust move slowly through the air. There is no rush in him, but there is clarity. The past days have settled into something steady, no longer heavy, no longer surprising. They feel like a responsibility that fits. His phone vibrates once on the table. A short message from Jimmy asks if he would be willing to return for a brief segment, not for promotion, not for humor, but for something unfinished. Keanu does not answer immediately. He closes his eyes and breathes in, then out. He knows the easy path would be to decline politely. The quieter path would be to accept without controlling the outcome. He replies with a simple yes. When he arrives at the studio later that evening, the energy is different from before. Calmer, less playful, but not tense. The staff moves with purpose, not excitement. No one treats this like a special event. That feels right. Keanu greets people by name when he can, nods when he cannot. He notices again the quiet workers, the ones who never step into frame. In the green room, Jimmy sits with him, no desk between them. Jimmy explains the plan gently. The segment will be short, no build-up, no music cue. Keanu will be asked one question and then the show will move on. Jimmy asks if Keanu wants to know the question in advance. Keanu says no, he trusts the space now. When the moment comes, Keanu walks onto the stage without applause cues. The audience claps anyway, but softly. Jimmy smiles, welcomes him back, and sits. The lights feel the same, yet the room feels deeper. Jimmy looks at Keanu and asks one question, simple and open. He asks what Keanu learned from the last time they spoke. Keanu pauses, not to create drama, but because the truth deserves care. He looks at the audience, not scanning faces, just acknowledging presence. He begins by saying that he learned how far quiet moments can travel. He learned that what feels small to one person can become a turning point for another. He tells them about the unseen people, not naming anyone, not telling stories that are not his to tell. He speaks about respect as an action, not a feeling. He says respect is choosing to see effort even when it is hidden. Kindness is choosing to stay gentle when you have the power to be loud. The audience listens in complete stillness. There is no suspense in the form of shock. The suspense is in the vulnerability of simplicity. Keanu does not frame himself as wise. He frames himself as learning. He says he is still learning. Then comes the emotional peak. Keanu shifts his attention away from himself entirely. He asks the audience to think of one quiet person in their own life. Someone who shows up without recognition. Someone who listens more than they speak. He asks them to carry that person with them when they leave tonight. Jimmy does not interrupt. He lets the moment breathe. The band does not play. The silence feels intentional, shared. The kindness in the room feels collective now, no longer centered on one voice. Keanu finishes by saying that laughter is beautiful, but respect is what allows laughter to feel safe. Humility is not lowering yourself. It is lifting others without announcing it. He thanks the audience for listening, not for applauding. The applause comes anyway, but it is not loud. It is steady, grounded. People stand slowly, not because they are told to, but because they feel moved. Keanu bows his head slightly, receiving the moment without holding it. After the show, backstage is quiet. No celebration, no excitement, just calm. The same crew member who once left quietly years ago passes by and meets Keanu's eyes. They exchange a small nod. Nothing more is needed. Later that night, Keanu returns home. He sits alone again, the city distant outside. He reflects on how the story has shifted. It is no longer about a message or a note or a moment on television. It is about what happens when attention is used with care. He senses that one final step remains. Not another appearance, not another speech. Something smaller, something truer. The suspense tightens gently, pointing toward an ending that will not be public but personal. Keanu turns off the light and sits in the dark for a moment, feeling gratitude without urgency. He knows now that the real climax is not being seen, but choosing how you see others. And tomorrow, he will act on that understanding. Morning arrives quietly without announcements or expectations. Keanu wakes before the city fully stirs, the light outside soft and patient. He sits at the edge of the bed for a moment, listening to his own breathing. There is no rush to become anything today. There is only a calm intention, clear and steady, waiting to be lived. He makes coffee and stands by the window, watching a neighbor walk a dog slowly, stopping often, not because they must, but because they choose to notice the world. Keanu feels a gentle recognition in that rhythm. This is the pace he wants to keep. Not slower than life, not faster than truth. The thought from the night before returns not as pressure but as direction. One final step, small and true, he does not need to announce it. He does not need permission. Kindness rarely does. Later that morning, Keanu leaves his home without telling anyone where he is going. No assistants, no plans, no cameras. He wears simple clothes, the kind that do not invite attention. The city moves around him, busy and unaware. That feels right. He stops first at a small diner, the kind with worn tables and quiet regulars. He orders breakfast and thanks the server by name because he read the name tag and chose to remember it. They smile, surprised, then relaxed. A small thing, but real. From there, he walks several blocks to a community building tucked between taller structures. It does not look important. It rarely makes headlines. Inside, people gather for different reasons: support, learning, rest. Keanu enters without introduction. No one recognizes him at first, and that feels peaceful. He sits in the back during a morning session, listening. A man speaks about returning to work after a long absence. A woman talks about learning how to ask for help. No one is performing. No one is impressing. They are simply sharing what it feels like to continue. Keanu listens with full attention, the kind that does not interrupt or fix. During a break, someone offers him water. He accepts and thanks them. They exchange a few words, nothing personal, nothing heavy, just presence. Keanu feels grounded here, not because he belongs, but because everyone does. Before leaving, he asks quietly if there is any way to help, not today, not visibly, just in general. The coordinator smiles and says help often looks like consistency. Showing up, remembering. Keanu nods. He understands that kind of commitment. He leaves a donation without ceremony, not large enough to draw attention, not small enough to be empty. He does not put his name on it. The coordinator notices anyway and says thank you. Keanu says you are welcome and means it as a shared statement, not a transaction. Outside, the city feels brighter, not because it changed, but because he did. He walks again, hands relaxed, breath even. The suspense that once followed him has dissolved into something quieter. Completion does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like relief. His phone buzzes once. A message from Jimmy. It says the response to the segment has been gentle and strong. People are sharing stories with each other, not arguing, not competing. Jimmy says thank you not as a host, but as someone who needed the reminder too. Keanu replies with a simple line, "Thank you for holding the space." The rest of the day passes without events worth retelling, and that is the point. Keanu spends time reading. He cooks a simple meal. He takes a walk as the sun lowers. Each action feels intentional without being heavy. In the evening, he receives another message, this one from the quiet crew member. The message says they started writing again, something they had stopped doing years ago, not for an audience, just for themselves. They say the night on the show did not change their life. It reminded them that it was still theirs. Keanu reads the message slowly. He places the phone down and closes his eyes. He feels gratitude rise, not pride. Gratitude that kindness moved without needing him to push it. Gratitude that respect multiplied on its own. He thinks back to the laughter at the beginning of the story, how easy it was, how harmless it felt. He understands now that laughter was never the problem. Forgetting was, forgetting the quiet people, forgetting the effort behind smiles, forgetting that strength often whispers. That night, as the city lights glow softly, Keanu writes a few lines in his notebook. Not for a speech, not for a post, just for himself. He writes that kindness is not a moment, it is a direction. Respect is not applause, it is attention. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is remembering you are not alone. He closes the notebook and turns off the light. Somewhere else, a person who watched the show laughs again, freely this time, without hiding. Another person pauses before reacting and chooses patience. Another decides to check on someone they usually overlook. None of them trace the choice back to a television moment. They just know something shifted. And that is how the story completes itself. Not with a line that echoes, but with actions that continue quietly. Laughter returns to its place, lighter now, safer. Respect stays, steady and unseen. Kindness moves forward not as a lesson, but as a habit. The night ends without spectacle. The morning will begin the same way.